Hello and welcome to Politics Today, reaching you live from our global headquarters here in the nation's Commercial Nerve Center in Lagos. I'm Jeffrey Uzonga, bringing you up to speed with the biggest happenings at prime time in the polity and in politics. And of course, moments ago, literally everyone was glued to their television because of what's playing out at the Vatican. And we're going to look at that in just a moment. But today, broadly speaking, we'll be looking at those reform bills that is going to change the tax administration of Nigeria, putting it on a different trajectory altogether. There's been a lot of talk, argument, politics and politicians looking at all sides to see what works for all sides. And eventually that consensus has been reached, and then they have now passed the bill. And of course, besides all of that, there's also Electoral Offences Commission bill that has passed second reading. What does this really mean? So there's a lot of consideration in terms of what we'll be looking at today as to the legislations that will guide the future of our nation, whether through electioneering or fiscal authority in the administration of tax. So those are the broad conversations we'll be having today. But let's get back to what played out today. 2 days in, at the conclave at the Sistine Chapel, the Roman Catholic Church now has a new leader to succeed Pope Francis. His 69-year-old Robert Prevost, now Leo XIV, the first American to occupy the revered office, who is seen as a reformer. Earlier, white smoke billowed from the chimney at the Sistine Chapel, signaling the cardinals locked inside have elected a new leader for the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. Thousands of pilgrims and curious onlookers in the St. Peter's Square guided, cheered, applauded, awaiting that moment, and eventually it came to be. And that is the new Pope you're looking at, going for Pope Leo XIV, emerging at the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica. So congratulations to the Catholic faithful on having a new Pope to succeed Pope Francis, who passed on a few weeks ago. But besides all of that, President Tinubu was in Anambra State today, and he commissioned a series of projects, including the Anambra State Government House, which you understand is a series of about 30-something buildings in that sense. And this is said to be the first government house since Anambra was created. They were having, what we understand, there was this makeshift place they were using as the government house. So all of the administration had passed without building an edifice in that sense for the Anambra State government. Well, Chukwuma Soludo took the bull by the horn and has actually built this. But the president said a few things at that event, which had the NSA, elder statesmen like Chief, I think, Emeka Anyoko, several inaugurations he made. But the president took time to talk about unity and diversity on one hand. He also talked about his bold reforms that are actually very necessary in his view to bring Nigeria to a path to prosperity, and he's calling on citizens to unite behind a renewed up agenda to have a better future for the country. Maybe we'll take a listen to some of the things he said.
I've just commissioned several landmark projects, particularly the Solution Fund City, the Government House Mini City, the Anambra Tower of Light, the Heroes Salute status, and unveiling of the 8-lane Emeka Anyoko Boulevard, which constitute part of the initial step on the path towards your audacious vision of Anambra, an African Dubai, Taiwan, Silicon Valley. Together with the massive infrastructure transformation and human capital development, these are bold statements of vision and what leadership achieved in such a short time a few years ago.
President of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu, speaking at that inauguration. I wish we could take that part where he talked about his reforms. But hey, let's also tell you some things that played out on the floor of the Nigerian Senate today, where the president of the Senate actually took a swipe at the presidential candidate of the Labour Party in the 2023 presidential election, because at the memorial lecture in honor of Chief Ike Clark, who has not been buried yet, but the other statesman, the Niger Delta leader, there were memorial lectures being organized in his honor, and part of what was said, we played it on the program yesterday, where Mr. Peter Obi was talking about the labor of our heroes being in vain and referencing some of the things he said as truths, not demarketing Nigeria. But Senator Godswill Akpabio had actually taken a swipe at him, saying, look, before you lead the country, why don't you put your party that is in chaos in order? Maybe we'll take a listen to some of the things he said.
Just yesterday, one of the presidential aspirants in the last election, Peter Obi, His Excellency and former governor of Anambra, said that the labors of our leaders who have passed on were in vain. They were not in vain. The mere fact that Nigeria is still standing together shows clearly that their labors were not in vain. Very few countries that came up with the size of Nigeria are still together today. Many have been fragmented. Baldwin Clark lived through the days of USSR, and they went into they scattered into various countries, and up till now, there is still war, trying to see whether they can come back together. Nigeria, despite our difficulties, God has kept us together because of the voices of people like Baldwin Clark. So clearly, his labor and labors were not in vain. Peter Obi, show leadership like Edwin Clark did by resolving first the crisis in the Labour Party.
All right, politicians, being politicians there. So responding to some of the comments made by Mr. Peter Obi yesterday at that memorial lecture. We're here for all of what plays out with the rhetorics of the political class. But the bigger thing that happened on the floor of the Senate today, which is quite remarkable, is going to define the future of the fiscal authority in how they collect tax, in how they manage tax, literally reforming the entire tax architecture of the country. 4 bills were before the House of Reps and the Senate has now passed those 4 bills. And so we're looking at a new future as far as the tax reforms are concerned. So today, that's the big thing, or the biggest thing, if you want to say that happened on the House. So in the House, on the floor of the Senate, I should say. So they say that they will also constitute a conference committee to ensure harmonization of the process with the House of Reps to mark this first feat to modernize Nigeria tax laws. Okay, so we'll bring you other stories that we've been tracking on our political roundup stories. I'll get to the conversation for the day.
The House of Representatives has passed a resolution to invite the Ministers of Finance, Budget and Economic Planning, the Accountant General of the Federation, as well as the Governor of the Central Bank. This is sequel to a motion on the need to investigate the non-payment of contractors working with federal ministries, departments and agencies since 2024. The motion was raised by the lawmaker representing Ndokwa Ukwani Federal Constituency of Delta State, Honorable Nnamdi Ezechi, who warned that if not promptly addressed, the situation can lead to mass protests, legal disputes, and complete paralysis of public projects. Meanwhile, a bill to establish an Electoral Offences Commission has scaled second reading in the House of Representatives. A court sitting in Akure, the capital, has dismissed a suit seeking to nullify the victory of Governor Lucky Aiyedatiwa and his deputy, Dr. Olaide Adelani, in the November 16, 2024 governorship election. In a unanimous judgment read by Justice Oyebisi Omoleye, the court affirmed the judgment earlier delivered by the Federal High Court, which dismissed a suit filed by the candidates of the New Nigeria People's Party. Challenging the validity of the primary election that produced Aiyedatiwa as a candidate of the All Progressives Congress, APC. Justice Adegoke in her address noted that striking out the name of the NNPP as one of the plaintiffs rendered the suit impotent and consequently dismissed it. The Congress for Progressive Change bloc within the All Progressives Congress has affirmed its loyalty to the ruling party and President Bola Tinubu, insisting that it will not join any coalition ahead of the 2027 general elections. At a news conference in Abuja, the leader of the bloc and former governor of Nasarawa State, Senator Tanko Almakura, notes that the majority of former CPC members within the APC will not enter into any form of coalition against President Tinubu in the 2027 presidential election.
Let it be known clearly that we have not left the APC. We are very much here, standing tall, standing proud, and standing firm within the party that we have found through sweat, sacrifice, and patriotic commitment. We remain part and parcel of the APC family.
In Edo State, the People's Democratic Party, PDP, has described the defection of the Speaker of the Edo State House of Assembly, Blessing Agbibaku, to the All Progressives Congress, APC, as a show of shame. The chairman of the Edo PDP Caretaker Committee, Anthony Aziegbemi, stated this during a press briefing at the party's state secretariat in Benin City, the state capital. He maintained that Tuesday's defection did not come as a surprise because the Speaker had been involved in anti-party activities for some time now. 3 members of the House of Representatives from Katsina State have defected from the People's Democratic Party to the All Progressives Congress. The lawmakers are Abdullahi Balarabe, Abubakar Aliyu, and Yusuf Mijigiri. The notices of defection were read by Tajuddin Abbas, Speaker of the House, during plenary on Thursday. The lawmakers attribute their defection to the internal crisis in the opposition party. 3 Labour Party members of the House of Representatives have dismissed their purported suspension from the party, describing it as laughable and a desperate attempt by a, quote, dethroned emperor, end quote, to cling to power. In a joint statement, the 3 LP lawmakers expressed dismay that Abure, instead of working to improve the fortunes of the Labour Party, seemed focused on orchestrating his disintegration to appease external forces driving his actions.
All right, welcome back. I know you can remember how much furore in that sense, how much uproar the tax reform bill generated at some point, led by Taiwo Yedele, when he came up with these 4 bills to change the landscape, literally, of our tax architecture, literally looking at our fiscal future. And he covered a couple of the bills: Nigerian Tax Bill, Nigerian Tax Administration Bill, Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Bill, and Joint Revenue Board Establishment Bill. So these are the 4 bills that, when it's assented by the president, will turn to become law, and it's going to be the guiding principle. Some will come into effect literally almost close to immediately, some in 90 days and all of that, so that every business person, every stakeholder, which is you and I as Nigerians, as individuals, as well as businesses, can properly prepare and prep to get ready for some of the reforms. Some people have criticized part of the bill, and some have said, on the whole, it's a great idea. It's not a perfect document in that sense. So we had to bring in someone who understands all of this to bring us up to speed as to what exactly we should be preparing for. So no longer rhetorics is now a reality. It's just a question of a signature of President Bola Tinubu, and voila, we're into a new era. Wale Ajayi is the head of Tax Africa at the KPMG. He joins us on the program. Mr. Ajayi, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, you're going to do a lot of the heavy liftings for us. We know, one of the most popular parts of the bill, actually, that Nigerians are a lot conversant with, was a political angle that has to do with the derivation when it came to population, derivation, equality, and there was that back and forth. Eventually, there was an agreement that keep equality where it should be, 50, and then alternate between derivation and the other element, which was 30-20 in that sense. Walk us through what kind of future Nigerians practically, as individuals, as small businesses, as big corporates, even as government, we should be looking at going forward as we prepare for the ascent of the president.
Oh, thank you so much for that question. I think the very first thing I would like to say is that, like you rightly noted in your introduction, the bill is not perfect, but it's a great way to start. And as we start, we'll then find out there are certain areas, certain provisions that we need to make. In terms of changes, like let me start with corporate. I think one fundamental thing that the bill has done, I mean, obviously there's a need for harmonization between the Senate and the House so that we can get one bill. But speaking to the corporates, in terms of the major change there is the fact that currently, when the company makes losses, it will pay taxes, right? So there's a minimum tax of 0.5% of the income, less frank investment income that they have to pay. Now, what the bill has done, is to ensure that any company that makes losses doesn't have to pay taxes. But then there is a counter provision or a provision that is counterproductive in the bill, and that is where the bill introduces the concept of effective tax rate. Now, what this means, of course, is that the minimum tax that any company will pay, except you're a small company, which is defined as a company that has a revenue of 100 million and assets of 250 million, right, and below, right, that you then have to pay an effective rate of 15%. Right? So this is that, right, the tax that anyone will pay will be less than 15, it will be up to 15%, especially if the revenue is up to 50 billion. So that's one key provision, in the bill. And I think the second thing I would like to say is that we've always been talking about the issue of multiple taxes, multiple levies here and there. And so what the bill has done is to consolidate, to reduce those number of taxes that we have in Nigeria into single digit. So you have a development levy that has replaced the plethora, of levies, that you see. Then in the area of VAT, yes, you did speak about the political issues, but unfortunately that took the shine away from the bill. That was not the only issue in the bill. That is just talking about distribution. But I think the fundamental change we made in the area of VAT is the fact that businesses cannot claim what we call input VAT, all input VAT, whether it is in respect of services or in respect of fixed asset against the output VAT. Currently, you cannot do that. The only input VAT you can claim is what is limited to the goods that you buy or that you sell. So it's only manufacturers that can actually, or traders that can claim input VAT. If you're a service company, you can't claim input VAT. The other thing that must quickly add with respect to VAT is the fact that we need revenue assurance in Nigeria, and is the use of physical devices. In other words, the tax authorities will even know your revenue before you file your tax returns, right? So they can track the revenue that companies are making, and they can also track the expenses that revenue, are incurring. So in all, when you look at the provisions, I mean, they're quite, fundamental, and I think it's going to transform, the landscape. If I may just add with respect to individuals, right? One thing that the bill has done is that it has increased the minimum, the graduation rate for tax in Nigeria has changed. So the effective, the top bracket for Nigeria now has now moved from 24, to about 50 million. So companies and individuals that earn 50 million will have to pay the top rate of 25%. So in other words, what the bill is trying to do is to ensure that people that earn lower income pay less tax, and people that earn big income pay higher taxes. So that's all the essence of the bill. And of course, there are some other changes that are, that are incorporated in there.
All right, fantastic points you raised. I know it's a political show, and we don't try to talk so much numbers, but it's important because this is going to affect our life one way or the other, so that a lot of people are not shocked. So let's talk about some things. One of the things I want to ask you, with what you've seen, you have an overview, just like some of us have an overview of this bill, whether it's the NTAB or all of the names that these things are called. Is this going to promote and ease business in that sense? That's the first question. And I want you to also respond to the issue of fiscalization, which I've always raised. Because without fiscalization, which simply talks about the technology we adopt to track all the, how the money is moving and out by the revenue collecting agency, this is just going to be a lot of talk without action. So I want you to speak to the issue of fiscalization and whether or not in truth, because in paper it could be something, and when it's implemented it becomes another thing altogether. Are we in for better business environment? Because businesses have complained we've lost billions of dollars because of policy flip-flop. Are we seeing a future that is consistent given this tax bill?
Okay, so let me address the issue of ease of doing business. Let me start by saying that tax is not the primary driver why investors will invest in a particular country. There are so many other considerations that investors will look like of course, the legal environment, political stability, economic stability. So there's so many other factors that they look at. So it's not just tax. It's not just because of the incentives that a country, is offering that they will invest. So there's so many other considerations. But having said that, when you look at the provisions of the bill, one of the things that we've sought to do in the bill is to ensure that we align with leading practices, and also to remove, the ambiguities that are normally associated, with laws. But in any event, you can't completely, eliminate the issue of interpretation, because the way you look at a particular provision is dependent on your knowledge, is dependent on your experience. So in a way, but there are provisions there. So for example, the issue of ombudsman that they've introduced, that is designed to ensure and protect, the taxpayers against, all sorts of treatment by tax authorities. So there's so many provisions that would help to, promote ease of doing business. But like I've said, tax is not the only thing. Then you talk about the issue of fiscalization. Look at the 2025 budget, right? We're supposed to generate, the expected revenue is about 55 trillion, and we're going to spend about 14 trillion, right? When you look at the fundamental assumption, that creates a deficit of 14 trillion, right? So there's a gap, right? But when you look at what has happened even to, which has gone down below $60, even though the reference price for crude is about $75. So already the gap is getting wider, right? And so we've got to find a way to ensure that we can assure revenue. And one way of doing this is by tax authorities introducing technology. There is no tax authority anywhere in the world that has not incorporated technology, to enhance compliance. And that is what the bill seeks to do. We just want us to align with the rest of the world so that we can guarantee if a taxpayer says he has made this much money in revenue, it should be easily verifiable. We don't want to have to spend so much time, right? Checking and confirming. The trail is always there. So when you look at the fiscalization, yes, it's going to ensure revenue assurance. But the other thing, of course, I would say is that for smaller companies, of course, it comes with its cost. And even for bigger companies, especially in a country like Nigeria, where the internet is not stable, right? So that may be a big issue, but that is the best way to start, and we'll pick it up from there.
One other thing I want you to look at, because at the end of the day, we're going to be taxing businesses, we're going to be taxing people, but we look at Nigeria's GDP per capita, which is basically the relative in terms of ratio between the GDP and the population in that sense, just for a common frame of reference for the audience in this sense. So we are less than $1,000. We are in the range of, say, 800s when you divide 182 billion by a huge number estimated. So now that this tax is about to be implemented, there is a portion that has to do with the payee for people who earn less than $1 million a year to be exempted. But our purchasing power is low, our GDP per capita is low. Do you think that the lawmakers did a great job, or should have annotated on that particular provision to increase it to say, because that simply means that everybody who earns about 90 to 100,000 is exempted from payee. Even if you earn 300,000 naira now in Nigeria, it looks like you're still a poor man. You're not even in the middle class in that sense. Is that something that we should have adjusted ahead of this?
Well, I think one of the things they've tried to do is to ensure that as much as possible, right, we are not taxing poor people, right, and the rich people are paying their fair share of tax revenue. That's the starting point, right? Now, there are arguments as to whether the baseline should be 800,000 or should be higher, right? But you got to start from somewhere. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at the graduated rates, the way they've done it, right, it actually, for people that earn lower income, they pay less than they will be paying now, right? And people that earn higher income, they pay more, right? And I think the whole idea of what government is trying to do is to ensure, remember again from what I said before, that Nigeria is facing a revenue crisis, right? Because there's so many incentives that have been given. And the question is, how do you even pay, for those incentives that have been given? So there's got to be a way to, to balance the two. Why we want people to pay, taxes, but let the burden fall on people that are, on rich people. So it's just a balance, a delicate balance that, the committee and, of course, the National Assembly, they're trying to make.
Just before we go to the controversial part, please help me do some clarification. Because I know that when a public presentation was done, I think it was the Customs Service, I'm not sure, but I think they were the one that raised a few observations. So what does this mean? We have 3 or 4 bills. Nigeria tax bill,
yes,
The most controversial one, which has a political angle, is the Nigerian Tax Administration Bill. We'll come to that in just a moment. Nigeria Revenue Service Establishment Bill and Joint Revenue Board Establishment Bill. Let's talk about that Revenue Service Bill. What does this mean? Does it mean effectively customs, no agency of government is allowed to collect any form of revenue from anybody apart from this new board? And what will that future look like if the answer is yes? Help us, educate us.
You know, one of the problems we've seen in Nigeria is lack of transparency when it comes to revenue collection, right? So first and foremost, the bill has not scrapped the Nigerian Customs Service or any revenue, collecting agency. What they've simply done, the bill has simply done, is to ensure that collection, there is only one single point of collection. So when you're paying your custom duties, it goes to the FRS. So there is an oversight, right? So that is what the bill has done. All right, so customs will continue to do what they're doing, but in terms of collection, the collection goes to one central body, which of course is the new National Revenue Service. So just to provide the needed transparency, right, in the way revenue is collected. Because if you look at it really, and you look at some countries in the world, they always have one, what you call one revenue service, and that revenue service is always, comprising the custom and the tax authorities. But in Nigeria, we've deemed it necessary to separate the two. So all we've done is to say collection will rest with the new revenue service. That is what the bill is talking about.
So within the bill's framework, I know we talk about the commission, or in this sense, we'll call it the service, because that's the last name there. In terms of checking that there is transparency, there is no corruption, because this means more exposure, more financial exposure in that sense. And this is a situation where we're trying to block leakages, because streamlining means we're trying to be more efficient and block leakages. But people, human beings, Nigerians, you and I, will be in charge of this. How will the government check itself to make sure that the humongous amount of money that will now go straight up to this commission or the service in this sense, we don't hear a story that touch, as they say in Nigeria?
That is exactly where we need to introduce technology. Because the only way you can increase your tax collection is not by, increasing your taxes, right? It's not imposing higher taxes on people. There is so much leakage in the system. And the only way we can do that to improve compliance, right, is to introduce technology. And if you look at what the FRS, and then if the bills is passed and you then have the National Revenue Service, they're investing big in technology. And that will help to plug leakages. When you have less manual intervention in any system, right, you can really ensure that, in terms of collection, it is seamless, right? And I know if we do that, it will really put to rest, the fear of people that, oh, why can you allow one single, revenue service to be collecting all this money, right? Technology is always there, and there will always be trail. And really and truly, this is the best way to go. It is only when you have multiple agencies, multiple systems collecting, then that is when you have leakages, and we need to plug in those leakages, because we can't actually increase our tax to GDP ratio, which is abysmally small right now. When you compare Nigeria to other countries and look at what we're making, initially we said it was about 10%, we moved it to 12%. My understanding as of last year is that tax to revenue tax to GDP ratio has gone up to 13%. But we really need a minimum of at least 15% for us to be able to deliver the dividend of democracy to people. And one of the problems that we have is in the area of collection, and we need to do something about that. And that is what the bill, has attempted to address.
One of the greatest tests, Mr. Ajayi, I'm totally out of time. I just wanted to comment on this. Is that part that wants to remove those boys on the streets of Lagos, those ones that block us and block those vehicles on the road. This bill intends to remove them and, regularize them in that sense. I think that will be the true test of how successful this gets to the grassroots. But I must thank you so much, Mr. Wale Ajayi. We'll always call on you to bring your expertise on this subject matter. Head of Tax Africa, KPMG. I'm sure you're very happy right now because this is good for the country and it's good for all of us. We hope we can execute this as well as possible, as much as possible. Mr. Ajayi, thank you, sir.
Yes, it is good. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Bye.
All right, we'll take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll be talking to a member of the House of Representatives who sponsored the bill that has to do with electoral offenses. So there will now be an electoral offenses commission if that bill scales third reading. It scales second reading today. But what does this really mean? Do we need a commission to be able to challenge electoral offenses? And what are the contents of the bill? We'll be here to respond right after the break. Join us again. All right, so welcome back. We're looking at the future of electioneering or electoral practices, if you in that sense. I talked about Electoral Offenses Commission Establishment Bill that has passed second reading. The member who sponsored this bill joins us from Abuja studio, Honorable Adebayo Balogun. He joins us from Abuja studio. Honorable Balogun, thank you so much for coming on the program and for your patience. Okay, I think the natural place to start, when people hear that there's going to be an Electoral Offenses Commission, if it eventually passes third reading and is assented to by the president, you'll do us a bit of service to give us an overview of what the objective of this bill is already, that no extant law is already handling in that sense. Or is this a first step in unbundling INEC in that direction? Honorable.
Well, you just said it is one of the steps in unbundling INEC. What are the areas, what are the issues that we think are actually overbundling INEC? We are looking at removing the area of registration, voters registration from INEC, probably giving it to NIN, NIMC. We're looking at creating an Electoral Offense Commission, the one we were just talking about, to reduce the time INEC is using on litigation of offenders. And sometimes, you know, INEC officials too are also culpable. And when you want INEC to prosecute his own people, so sometimes there could be conflict of interest. So these are reasons why the public, because it's not just what we want, it's what the public wants. We've had stakeholders meeting, people to bring in memoranda on various areas, and this is what they've been saying, that there must be Electoral Offenses Commission. And ours is to just put this together and convert it to a bill. It just passed the second reading, and it will go for public hearing, and it's the public that will determine if it's going to stay or not. So it's not what we want, it is what the public wants.
Honorable, that's why we are starting this public hearing today already. So this is our first public hearing, Honorable. So let's highlight what are some of the provisions of the bill that we should actually look at. I've seen some excerpts, but I just don't want to call so I don't call the wrong thing. What are specific excerpts that we should take note of? Because at the end of the day, if this bill does not actualize or get to a point where both the big boys who are involved in malpractice and the small ones who are always being caught are not brought, the rule of law doesn't follow through with both of them, then it's going to be antithetical in that sense. So are there provisions that are specifically helping us to track some of the big boys in the polity who may be involved in some of these practices?
The only thing we are just doing is to remove this function from INEC. It has been there before. INEC prosecutes offenders. The police prosecute offenders. There are various agencies that will prosecute offenders. If you are carrying large sum of money, EFCC can prosecute you. If you are found probably influencing election, the police can prosecute you. INEC can prosecute you. But what we are just saying now, let there be a body to now handle all these issues and remove it from INEC. Because most of the times, it gets to a stage where INEC find it difficult to pursue some of these cases. And after the election, we just find out that everything just die away. And like I said, it's about the public. We don't initiate the laws. Most of the laws come to the public. Ours is to represent you, convert into a bill, and you are going to be the one that will decide if it's actually worth the while or not.
Okay, I get that.
My committee went on various retreat, and yes. So the issue is there's nothing new in the bill. We are removing it from the Electoral Act and make it in a standalone. So all the offenses in the Electoral Act are there. It's just being removed from the Electoral Act and make it a standalone that is not longer going to be the function of INEC to do. There's going to be a body on its own that is going to handle electoral offenses.
Yeah,
so
that's
just what this bill is about.
Yeah,
it's unbundling INEC. Part of the things INEC has been doing.
Yes, I understand you, and I want you to land on that thought as well. So my questions are literally the same in this particular direction. So perhaps we are saying that the reason why we will catch the small fries who are the ones distributing this money and all of that, just a few INEC officials, because INEC is busy with too many things. So now we are unbundling this so that we can catch everybody who is involved. I can't remember any time in the last 24 years or 25 years of this democracy when a top person in government who won an election, maybe a senator, a member of the House of Reps, I think it's just one, I think in River State or so, I don't know how that even went, that is really brought to book. Because there are people that sponsor these people. That is my question. How can this streamlining help us to catch the big boys who are funding malpractice in our electoral process? That's my question.
You see, you think we can legislate everything. The process, there are some part of these laws that we cannot, our activities that we cannot legislate. If you talk about catching someone, number one, someone must report. Someone must report the activities. These are part of the issues. There must be a lot of public and education for us to know what are going to be electoral offenses. In fact, in that area, during the public hearing, there will be a lot of debates because there are a lot of offenses written in the act, in the bill, that even if I should lift you on the day of election with my own private vehicle, is an electoral offense. So there are so many provisions of the law that has been taken care. Like I said, all these things are not new. At least you are aware of what happened in Ogun State. One of the gubernatorial candidates was arrested and prosecuted for distributing recharge card on the day of election. This is because someone reported. That's why it was able to be prosecuted. So in ensuring that you catch people, it's going to be see something, say something. Those are the area of education that has to go in place. But in terms of the laws have been perfect in terms of prosecuting offenders. But what we are saying now is, okay, we are not going to let this be a body to INEC again. Let it stand alone. But there should be a lot of education in addressing our people to let people know that these are the offenses. Because most of these things can be in the books, but our people are aware of them. It is our responsibility now, this time around. Under this 10th Assembly, the mandate of Mr. Speaker, Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, is to ensure that we give the Electoral Act that is going to ensure fairness and inclusive electoral process. So the process is not just about the law now, it's about us ensuring that everything written in the law is at least practiced to the letter. So what we need more is about public education. But like I said, ours is to go along with the public. What do you want? We want Electoral Offences Commission. We are going to go to the public hearing. It is the responsibility of the public now to now say we want this to stay or not. So the provisions have been the same in terms of what we have in the Act already. The types of offenses that we have, we all know. You should not carry, you have a limited amount of money you must have on you on the day of election. You should not influence any voters by inducing them, either buying things for them. And there are a lot of areas that we overlook. All this one that will be cooking food on the day of election, sharing food on the day of election, they are electoral offenses. They've been there. We are not just putting it.
So does this law, Honorable, just a moment.
Distributing so many things, souvenirs.
for the purpose of, let's do a refresher, because these laws already exist. So, and that's why I'm very deliberate with where I'm going with the question, because when it comes to election, the desperate people are not the citizens. They are politicians like you and everybody who is running for office. It is not citizens. I am a journalist. My job is to observe and cover and report what is going on. INEC's job is to manage the election. The security agency's job is to make sure everywhere is in order. The biggest desperation is coming, or always comes, from the political class. And so whatever this law or this unbundling, let's not say law because it's already there, whatever this unbundling has to do, and that efficiency doesn't include catching the people that, quote and unquote, we suspect to be the ones that will be most desperate to do whatever it takes to win an election. Can we say the unbundling is effective?
You see, on the day of election, I, as a politician or a contestant on that day, will be in my unit. And you forget one thing, when it comes to election, many people have many reasons for even supporting a candidate. Because some people, their businesses, their survival or whatever, they might feel depends on a particular person winning. And so on their own, they want to prove that I am in charge of this constituency or in charge of this booth. So the issue is like, by the time everybody knows that whatever you do, you are on your own. So it's for us, like I said, it's more about voters' education now. It is, if I that I'm contesting, I'm in my booth, and I'm doing what I could in terms of the services I give to my community to ensure that I have followers. And you sit somewhere and you think the only way you can help me is to go around sharing money on the day of election. Then it's going to be your offense. Because the law says the person caught doing so exercise. So unless you feel you can prove that so person sent you and this approves, so there must be vicarious liability established to say that. But you know, the journalists, you know, you have your way of always attacking the politicians. Yeah, it's the politician that did this, that did that. But you know that everybody have their own reason within their own constituencies. If, for example, under my constituency, I have local government, I have wards. Within those wards, there are people who want to contest as councillors. So that person on his own has the reason where he wants to ensure that a party wins within his own constituency, the smaller constituency. So will you now say that whatever a councillor does was initiated by maybe the chairman or House of Assembly or House of Rep member? But let's leave whoever you assume is causing it. The issue is you should not do this. Let the person who is doing it know that it is an offense. You see, like I said, when I even went through myself, because during the last dispensation, I was not part of the Committee on Electoral Matters. But now that I'm the chairman of the Committee on Electoral Matters, and I went through the Electoral Act and the offenses. In fact, carrying someone on that day is an offense. Sharing food on that day is an offense. There are so many offenses we don't even know. And if people don't even know, then how do you even tell them that it's wrong? You catch some people doing some things and they'll tell you, yes, it's normal. So there's going to be a lot of education this time around. That's why this time around it's going to be a different ball game.
Honorable.
Our people are ignorant of so many things. You saw during the last election, people were even killing cows, doing barbecue at the polling booths, sharing drinks at the polling booths.
Well, I don't know, Honorable, I don't know how that...
So those are areas, that's why I said...
Yes, Honorable, I don't know how that is a very confusing and controversial part, because some people are sharing not because they want to influence you. Some people, sometimes you stay in that area for hours, God knows how long those hours are. I just want to entertain yourselves. So, you buy your drinks and all of that. But you are saying it's an offense.
It's about the law.
Yes, just hold on.
So it's about you...
What I'm saying is that journalists are not, I think politicians like you and the rest need to get this one, maybe just get it straight. Journalists are not against politicians. Our job is to hold you to account. You're a human being, you have exposure to our resources, our commonwealth. And it is only human for some people to want to pilfer into these resources. Our job is to beam that satellite on you and everybody who is involved in that practice. So if that is being enemy of the politicians, that's unfortunate. We're just doing our job. I just need to put that disclaimer on behalf of myself and my colleagues. We're just checking the system. But moving forward, since you're the chairman of that committee, let's talk about one other part that is not part of these electoral offenses. Appointment of INEC chairman and all the commission. It has been a very difficult issue for a long time. Justice Uwais has made some recommendation. Now you're in charge of that committee and you're a lawmaker generally at the end of the day. Don't you think it's time for us to zoom into that as well? Because the president, by December this year, is it before December? Because Professor Mahmoud will be leaving office in December also, is going to appoint him, appoint another person. Isn't it time for us to look at that critically, to build confidence in the people across party lines, that no one person can just decide and appoint anybody and we have to live with it whether we like it or not?
It's not just one person. The president recommends names to the National Assembly that are representing 109 senatorial districts in the country. And these are the people representing every one of us. It cut across all parties. So when the names are presented to the National Assembly, it is the responsibility of the National Assembly to scrutinize these names. And if they are found wanting, the names will be rejected. And you've seen that happening several times. And the president might have no choice than to replace such nominees. So, but there is no way. Let me actually, if I tell you today, give us a formula or a process that you think we can use before we leave this station. If you leave your lines open, 1,001 people will criticize whichever way you decide. So people say you should leave it to NJC.
Honorable, but Justice Uwais, I think, has made that proposal in his report. We already have one recommendation by that Uwais report.
Justice Uwais is just a person. Excuse me.
It's a committee. It's not Uwais. It's a committee that made a recommendation. He just chaired the committee.
Yes, I know. It's commission. Yes, they are all part. We've had several other committees. Ongoing, we are doing the electoral reform. We've invited a lot of people to bring in their inputs. What we are saying is there is no way that you can have a perfect system. But we have it on, it's on the board now when we go for public hearing. We will listen to the people. The issue you are talking about is also on the board now. We are taking it has also passed second reading. So it's going for a public hearing. You see, as lawmakers, our job is not to enforce a law on the people. Our job is to midwife and be the umpire. At the end of the day, what Nigeria wants is what we report back on our report that will go for third reading and then eventually eventual consideration of the bill. So what we are trying to do this time around is to educate the public. I'm emphasizing the issue of education. We need to educate the people to know that any law is their responsibility to ensure that they look at it properly and give their own input. Look at what happened in the tax bill. It has never been like that in the history of Nigeria. During the second reading, people raised a lot of issues. And we have to go and refine, redefine. Even we started public hearing before the public hearing. And at the end of the day, it passed. After going for public hearing, there were also some other amendments. So that's what we are saying. Electoral Offences Commission bill is just a bill. It's Nigeria that will say we want it or we don't want it. It's not my own initiative. It's an outcome of discussion with the people. Look, there are some people who believe, like you rightly said, do we need another agency? Do we need another commission?
Yes, that's a question.
But what are the problems that we have even now in prosecuting offenders? What are the problems? One major problem is after every election, all the people that complain, all the arrests that were made, you don't find the police officers who are supposed to come and give evidences to come back. Probably the person was posted from Kaduna to Lagos during the election and has been taken back to Kaduna. And when prosecution starts, How do you ensure that such a person will be able to come back every time and give evidences? So these are other issues. It's not just about removing it as a body. There are other issues. But like I said, we are the umpires. In the process of making law is that we go through this process. There must be first reading, second reading, go for public hearing. The public will say we want it or we don't want it. I can't say we must have it.
All right, Honorable. You know, this is, I consider this an ongoing conversation. The issue around whether it's necessary or not, the issue around efficiency and effectiveness, the issue around whether it can catch, for me, the big boys, some of who sponsor these things, not just the small fries, all of that, I think is going to be part of the conversation at a public hearing.
You have visited. You see, one major issue is that you also visited. You are expecting some politicians to be caught.
Yes, I do. Yes, Honorable, I'm going to admit that. I expect big politicians to be caught. Yes. No, I'm not shying away. Every Nigerian wants a big politician to be caught.
You see, on the day of election, let me tell you something. Let me tell you.
There are no two ways about it. We would like them to be caught.
If a politician is doing well,
it will build confidence in the system.
And some people, no, wait, what I'm saying is, hello, let's, you see, we shouldn't be fixated. The issue is, let's have a system. Let's have the laws. Let people be educated. Then they will be able to now know the right step to take. In Nigeria today, I can tell you, with beavers, every politician now knows that if you don't perform, you are in trouble. The fear of beavers is the beginning of wisdom.
All right, I think that's a good place. That's a fine place to anchor.
This is no longer the time where you can do this.
Just land on your thought. 10 seconds. Land on that thought. 10 seconds.
Okay. Oh, yes, that's I said. The fear of the beavers is the beginning of wisdom. So everybody now knows that if you don't perform, you cannot expect the people to vote for you. And there's no way you can influence vote anyhow nowadays. All
right. Thank you, Honorable. Thank you so much for coming on the program. As you said, we're going to go for the public hearing and hear all of this. Honorable Adebayo Balogun, a member, a member of the House of Representatives.
Before you go, let me give
we're totally out of time. We're totally out of time.
Hello?
Yes, we're totally out of time.
I want you, yes, just 1 minute, just 10 seconds.
Yes.
I want you to, yes, 1 second. Please, help us educate the people. Whenever public hearing is going on, please help us tell people to always attend and come up with position. That is the only way we can have very effective laws.
They are all listening. They are all listening. Everybody's interest is the same, to make Nigeria a better place. Thank you, Honorable Adebayo Balogun, member of the House of Reps. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, yes, for the records, I want the big politicians to be caught, just like you. I'm sure you agree with me on that. And that's it on the program. Thank you so much for your time and company. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. Good night.